This comprehensive guide is designed to support you in developing strong critical thinking abilities that are essential for wise decision-making and effective problem-solving in every area of your life. As you strengthen the way you analyze situations, question information, and reflect on your own thoughts, you'll become better equipped to face personal and professional challenges. Evaluate what you hear and read with care, and choose actions that truly align with your goals and values. You'll learn how to spot and reduce your biases, how to challenge assumptions that may be holding you back, how to engage seriously with different points of view, and how to cultivate mental resilience that helps you adapt and grow. This book is ideal for students, workers, leaders, and anyone committed to self-improvement. Its aim is to empower you to move toward your aspirations and flourish in all areas of your life. Chapter 1. An Introduction to Critical Thinking. Have you ever stopped to ask yourself why some people seem to move through life's difficulties with a sense of direction and steady confidence, while others repeatedly feel stuck, make the same mistakes, or become overwhelmed by choices and uncertainty? The difference is often not superior intelligence, fancy degrees, or fortunate circumstances. What frequently separates them is the ability to think critically. Critical thinking is the deliberate practice of examining information, experiences, and ideas before you accept them as true or act on them. It means stepping back from your automatic reactions and your first impressions, and asking what might really be going on beneath the surface. Instead of simply taking things as they appear, you pause and ask yourself questions such as, is this actually accurate? What evidence supports this claim? What reasons are being offered for this conclusion? And are there other explanations or possibilities I should consider? You move from passive acceptance to active investigation. This habit of mind is crucial in a world overflowing with claims, data, and opinions. Each day, you are exposed to news stories, social media updates, advertisements, casual conversations, and your own inner commentary. All of these voices compete for your attention and try to shape what you believe and how you behave. Without a trained, reflective approach, you can easily feel lost, manipulated, or pulled in different directions. With critical thinking, you gain the power to sift through this noise, distinguish what is relevant from what is distracting, and make decisions that are more deliberate and well-founded. It is important to understand what critical thinking is not. It is not about being hostile, cynical, or constantly looking for flaws just to prove a point. It is not about arguing for the sake of winning or treating other people's ideas with contempt. True critical thinking is a commitment to understanding reality as clearly and accurately as you can, even when that requires you to adjust your beliefs or admit that you were mistaken. It is less about defeating others and more about working toward truth and sound judgment. Many people secretly suspect that critical thinking is an inborn talent, something a few gifted individuals naturally possess, while everyone else simply does the best they can. But in reality, critical thinking is a skill that can be developed. It resembles a muscle. The more you use it in daily life, the stronger and more responsive it becomes. At first, asking deeper questions or pausing before reacting may feel unfamiliar or slow. Over time, however, this way of thinking starts to become automatic. You learn to examine arguments, spot gaps in reasoning, and reflect on your own thought processes without needing to force yourself. The benefits of cultivating this skill reach into nearly every part of life. In your personal world, critical thinking helps. You move beyond impulsive decisions and short-term gratification. You become more aware of how your choices today influence your circumstances tomorrow. Instead of acting only on habit or emotion, you learn to look at the bigger picture. How will this decision affect my health, my relationships, my finances, or my long-term goals? What values do I want my actions to express? In relationships, critical thinking supports more thoughtful communication. Rather than jumping to conclusions about someone's motives or assuming you already know what they're thinking, you begin to ask clarifying questions and listen with genuine curiosity. You consider multiple explanations for their behavior instead of clinging to the first, most emotionally charged story your mind produces. This reduces misunderstandings and makes it easier to resolve conflicts with respect and empathy. In your professional life, critical thinking is one of the most sought-after abilities across all fields. Employers look for people who can analyze problems, generate solutions, and make sound judgments instead of blindly following instructions or reacting impulsively. Whether you work in business, education, healthcare, technology, or any other domain, your capacity to evaluate information, question assumptions, and make reasoned decisions sets you apart as a reliable and innovative contributor. To think critically, you must first notice how often your mind operates on autopilot. Much of the time, you respond to situations based on habits, emotional reactions, or familiar patterns rather than conscious reflection. For example, you might instantly believe a statement simply because it matches your existing views, or dismiss an idea just because it comes from a person you dislike. You might avoid certain opportunities because that's just not who I am, without examining where that belief came from or whether it still serves you. Critical thinking invites you to interrupt this automatic mode. It asks you to slow down and become curious about your own thinking. Why do I believe this? Where did this idea come from? Am I reacting to the facts in front of me or a toast story I've created in my head? By turning your attention to these questions, you begin to see your thoughts as something you can examine and shape, rather than as fixed truths that control you. An important aspect of critical thinking is learning to work with uncertainty. Many people dislike not knowing and rush to the first explanation that feels comfortable. But wise thinking accepts that some questions require time, research, and reflection. Instead of forcing a quick answer, you may choose to say, "I'm not sure yet," and gather more information. Critical thinking does not guarantee that you will always be right, but it increases the likelihood that your decisions are based on solid reasons rather than on fear, wishful thinking, or social pressure. As you grow in this skill, you develop what we might call an evidence-based mindset. Rather than treating feelings, rumors, or isolated anecdotes as proof, you become more interested in reliable sources, consistent patterns, and well-supported arguments. When you hear a claim, whether it's about health, politics, relationships, or money, you begin to ask, what supports this? Are there credible studies or expert analyses behind it? Does the evidence come from multiple independent sources or from one questionable place? Who benefits if I accept this idea, and could there be a hidden agenda? This evidence-focused approach does not mean you ignore your intuition or your personal experiences. Instead, it means you learn to integrate them with broader, more objective forms of information. You might notice a gut feeling, and then look for evidence that either supports or challenges it. You might acknowledge your personal story while also recognizing that it's only one piece of a larger picture. In this way, your decisions become both grounded in reality and aligned with your inner sense of meaning. Developing an evidence-based mindset also involves being willing to revise your views when new, convincing information appears. This can be uncomfortable, especially when a belief is tied to your identity, your community, or your past choices. Yet, the hallmark of genuine critical thinking is their readiness to say, I used to think this, but now that I've seen more evidence, I need to update my opinion. This flexibility is not a weakness. It is a sign of intellectual strength and maturity. Several key attitudes support this way of thinking: curiosity, open-mindedness, and intellectual humility. Curiosity is the inner drive that pushes you to ask questions, seek additional information, and explore perspectives beyond your own. Instead of accepting things simply because that's how they are, you wonder, how do we know? And could there be another way to understand this? Curiosity keeps your mind active and engaged with the world. Open-mindedness is the willingness to consider ideas and viewpoints that may challenge your current beliefs. It does not require you to accept every claim as true, but it does ask you to listen, examine the reasons, and evaluate the evidence before forming a judgment. An open mind can say, "I disagree, but I still want to understand how you see it," or "This idea feels strange to me, yet I will look into it before I decide." This attitude prevents you from becoming trapped in a narrow mental bubble. Intellectual humility is the recognition that your knowledge is always limited and that you, like everyone else, can make mistakes. It is the awareness that no matter how much you've studied or how intelligent you are, there will always be gaps in your understanding. Instead of clinging to the need to be right, you value learning and growth. Intellectual humility allows you to admit when you don't know something, to ask for help, and to accept correction when the evidence shows you were wrong. Together, curiosity, open-mindedness, and intellectual humility create fertile ground for critical thinking. They encourage you to keep asking questions, to look beyond your initial reactions, and to treat your own beliefs as changeable rather than fixed. As you cultivate these attitudes and pair them with practical tools for evaluating information and reasoning clearly, you lay the foundation for the deeper skills and strategies that the rest of this book will explore. Curiosity encourages you to ask questions, look for fresh information, and explore viewpoints that differ from your own. Open-mindedness lets you genuinely consider ideas that may challenge your current beliefs instead of rejecting them on instinct. Intellectual humility is the awareness that what you know will always be limited and that other people can teach you something, especially when they disagree with you. Together, these attitudes form the basis of what we can call a critical thinking mindset. This mindset shows up as a readiness to question assumptions, including your most comfortable ones, a healthy skepticism toward claims that lack solid support, and a deep commitment to continuous learning and growth. Developing such a mindset is not always comfortable. It asks you to leave familiar mental territory, face your own blind spots, and sometimes admit that your previous judgments were off. Yet the benefits are enormous. With a cultivated critical thinking mindset, you are better prepared to handle complex situations, make informed choices, and engage thoughtfully with a wide range of perspectives. By the time you reach this point, you have encountered the core ideas of critical thinking, the importance of sound reasoning, evidence-based judgment, and certain attitudes, curiosity, openness, humility, that support clear thought. But understanding these principles is only the beginning. To truly live as a critical thinker, you must also learn to apply these tools in the face of one of your biggest internal obstacles, your own cognitive biases. In the following pages, we will explore these biases in greater detail, how they shape your thinking, where they come from, and how you can lessen their power over your decisions. Once you start to recognize these mental habits, you'll be able to use critical thinking not just as an abstract concept, but as a practical shield against self-deception and distorted judgment. Imagine you are playing a game of chess. You feel confident in your plan, carefully anticipating each move and counter-move. Then, suddenly, you realize that half of your pieces have been invisible to you the entire time. That shocking moment is very similar to what happens when you first become aware of cognitive biases. They are the hidden pieces on the board of your mind, quietly influencing your judgments and choices without your conscious awareness. In this chapter, we will shine light on those hidden pieces and learn how to reclaim control of the game. Cognitive biases are systematic errors in thinking that distort the way you interpret information and make decisions. They do not mean you are foolish or incapable. They are not moral failings or proof of low intelligence. Rather, they are a natural side effect of how the human brain tries to handle the huge volume of information it faces every day. To manage this constant stream, your mind relies on mental shortcuts known as heuristics. These shortcuts usually help you act quickly in familiar situations, choosing a route you know, reading someone's tone, reacting to danger. In simple or routine contexts, heuristics are efficient and often accurate. But when you face complex problems, unfamiliar information, or emotionally charged issues, The same shortcuts can mislead you. One of the most common biases is confirmation bias, the tendency to look for, interpret, and remember information in ways that support what you already believe. It's the reason you may quickly accept evidence that agrees with your opinions while doubting, downplaying, or ignoring information that challenges them. You might seek out news sources, social media accounts, or friends who reinforce your views, creating a comfortable echo chamber where your beliefs feel constantly confirmed. Another powerful bias is the anchoring effect. This occurs when you place too much weight on the first piece of information you receive. For example, the initial price mentioned in a negotiation can strongly shape your idea of what is reasonable, even if that first number is arbitrary or exaggerated. That first anchor stays in your mind and subtly pulls your later judgments toward it. A third frequent bias is linked to the availability heuristic. Here, you judge how likely something is based on how easily examples come to mind. If you've recently seen dramatic news about a plane crash, you might vastly overestimate how dangerous flying is compared to driving, even though statistics show the opposite. Because the plane crash is vivid and memorable, it feels more common and more threatening than it really is. Recognizing these biases is the first step toward reducing their influence. But simple awareness is not enough. Your mind will still tend to slide back into familiar patterns. You need concrete strategies to counteract these habits. One powerful approach is to actively search for information that goes against your current views. This does not mean you must change your mind about every topic, but it does mean giving honest consideration to opposing evidence. You might follow reliable news sources that offer different perspectives, read authors whose worldview clashes with your own, or have respectful conversations with people who disagree with you. The goal is not to win a debate, but to broaden and refine your understanding. Another helpful strategy is to practice mental flexibility. When you encounter a claim, make a habit of asking, "What else could explain this?" Or, "Is there another way to see this situation?" Instead of fixating on a single answer, you explore multiple possibilities. This practice weakens the grip of your initial assumptions and helps you see past your first impression. You can also slow down the pace of your thinking when a decision's important. Biases thrive when you react quickly and uncritically. By deliberately pausing, taking a breath, writing down your thoughts, or sleeping on a choice, you give your more reflective, analytical mind time to engage. You move from automatic reaction to intentional evaluation. Seeking feedback from other people is another powerful tool against bias. Ask trusted friends, mentors, or colleagues to review your reasoning, especially when the stakes are high. They may notice blind spots, emotional triggers, or leaps in logic that you have overlooked. Listening to their perspectives does not mean you must agree with them, but it enriches your picture of the situation. Underlying all these techniques is, once again, intellectual humility, the recognition that your understanding is always partial and that you can revise your views in light of new, compelling evidence. Changing your mind in response to better information is not a sign of weakness. It is a hallmark of growth, wisdom, and maturity. As you work to challenge your cognitive biases, you will likely notice some inner resistance. These habits are deeply rooted, and questioning them can feel strange, uncomfortable, or even threatening to your sense of self. That discomfort is not a signal to stop. It is often a sign that you are stretching beyond your mental comfort zone. Real progress usually involves this kind of temporary unease. By the end of this stage, you will have a clear awareness of several common biases and practical methods for dealing with them. You'll start to develop a more flexible and open way of thinking, one that allows you to see beyond your first viewpoint and appreciate alternative angles. Yet recognizing biases is only one part of the toolkit. To truly master critical thinking, you must also learn how to apply these insights to concrete, real-world challenges. This is where structured problem-solving comes into play. Critical thinking is not just about spotting errors in reasoning. It is also about using a deliberate process to tackle complex problems in your daily life. The first key step is to define the problem clearly. Many difficulties become harder simply because they are vaguely described. Instead of saying, "Everything is a mess at work," you might specify, "We consistently miss project deadlines because our team doesn't have a clear system for assigning tasks." A precise problem statement transforms a vague frustration into something you can actually address. Once the problem is defined, you gather relevant information. This may include facts, data, personal experiences, and the perspectives of others who are involved. At this stage, it is important to separate assumptions from verifiable facts. Ask yourself what you know for sure, what you are merely guessing, and what you might need to investigate further. With a well-defined problem and solid information in hand, you're ready to generate possible solutions. Here, creativity matters. Brainstorming is a valuable technique. Allow yourself to list as many ideas as you can without judging them immediately. Some suggestions may seem unrealistic or strange at first, but they can spark more refined and practical options later. Many innovative solutions begin as ideas that initially looked too out there. After you have compiled several options, you move into evaluation. This is where your critical thinking skills really come to the forefront. For each potential solution, consider the likely benefits, costs, risks, and long-term consequences. Ask, what might happen if I choose this approach? Who will be affected and how? Does this align with my values and priorities? Are there unintended side effects I should anticipate? It can also be helpful to compare options directly. Which solution addresses the root of the problem most effectively? Which is realistic given your resources, time, and constraints? Which option gives you the best balance between short-term practicality and long-term benefit? Once you have carefully weighed your choices, select the most promising solution and create a step-by-step plan to implement it. Break the plan into concrete actions. Set realistic timelines, and, if you are working with others, clarify who will be responsible for each part. Problem solving, however, does not end once you start carrying out your plan. It is essential to monitor what happens and be ready to adjust if necessary. Maybe your first idea works well in some areas but fails in others. Rather than seeing this as a defeat, treat it as valuable feedback. You can refine your approach, test a modified version, or combine elements from different solutions. One of the most powerful abilities in problem solving is learning to reframe the problem. Sometimes the way you define an issue can limit the solutions you see. By looking at the situation from a different point of view, through another person's eyes, from a higher-level perspective, or with a different goal in mind, you may notice possibilities that were invisible before. As you strengthen your problem-solving skills, you will inevitably encounter moments of frustration or confusion. You may feel stuck, overwhelmed, or tempted to give up. When this happens, it can be wise to pause, step back, and give your mind a chance to rest. Often, clarity emerges after you have stopped pushing so hard and allowed your thoughts to settle. By the end of this phase, you will have a practical framework for approaching complex challenges. Define the problem, gather information, generate options, evaluate carefully, implement your plan, and adjust based on results. These steps turn vague worry into structured action, and they transform critical thinking from an abstract idea into a daily practice. In the next section, we will move deeper into the skill of analyzing information and arguments, helping you separate truth from illusion and distinguish sound reasoning from the subtle traps of faulty logic, much like a careful detective sorting through clues at a difficult case. When you begin to look more closely at your own thinking, you may notice that information comes at you from many directions: conversations, books, articles, videos, courses, social media, and your own internal dialogue. Critical thinking gives you a way to navigate all this material without becoming overwhelmed. One of its central tasks is learning how to analyze information and arguments so you can tell the difference between a claim that is well supported and one that only sounds convincing. A helpful way to picture this is to imagine yourself as a careful investigator. An investigator does not accept every story at face value, but also does not reject everything with automatic suspicion. Instead, they gather evidence, compare different accounts, and look for patterns that fit the facts. When you adopt this mindset, you move away from reacting to information based on how it makes you feel in the moment, and toward evaluating it based on its actual strength. One of the first questions to ask when you encounter a claim is, what is being said exactly? Many arguments are confusing because the main point is buried under emotional language, vague phrases, or extra details. Try to restate the claim in clear terms. The author is saying that. Or, the main point of this message is that. When you can express the idea simply, you have taken an important step toward understanding it. Next, ask, what reasons are given to support this claim? These reasons are often called premises. The conclusion is what someone wants you to believe or do. The premises are the justifications they offer. A sound argument connects its premises to its conclusion in a logical way, like sturdy steps leading up to a landing. If the steps are broken, missing, or made of weak material, the landing becomes unstable. Now consider the quality of the evidence behind those premises. Is the information specific and verifiable? Or is it vague and unsupported? Does the argument rely on concrete data, credible testimony, and well-documented facts, or mainly on personal stories, rumors, and emotional examples? Personal experiences can be meaningful, but by themselves they are not enough to establish a general truth. It is also important to ask whether there might be other explanations that fit the same facts. For instance, if a company's sales are dropping, one person might conclude, people no longer like our product. Another might say, our marketing is failing, and a third might suggest, the overall economy is slowing down. Each explanation could be plausible. Careful thinkers look at the evidence for and against each possibility before settling on a conclusion. At the heart of this process is logic, the art of reasoning in a clear, internally consistent way. Logical thinking does not require complicated formulas. At its core, it is about making sure your conclusions follow from your premises, and that your premises are themselves reasonable and well supported. It is useful to distinguish between deductive and inductive reasoning. Deductive reasoning starts with general principles and applies them to specific cases. For example, all metals expand when heated. Iron is a metal. Therefore, iron will expand when heated. If the premises are true and the structure is valid, the conclusion must be true. Inductive reasoning, on the other hand, moves from specific examples to broader generalizations. If you observe that a particular plant wilts every time it is left without water for several days, you might conclude that this plant type needs regular watering. Inductive reasoning is powerful and necessary for everyday life, but its conclusions are less certain. They are probable rather than guaranteed. Critical thinkers know the difference and avoid treating inductive guesses as absolute facts. Of course, in real life, arguments are rarely presented in neat textbook form. They show up in casual remarks, passionate speeches, advertisements, opinion pieces, and online debates. That's why learning to recognize common errors in reasoning, known as logical fallacies, is so valuable. These fallacies are patterns of faulty thinking that can make an argument seem strong when it is actually weak. One widely known fallacy is the ad hominem attack. Instead of examining the argument itself, a person criticizes the character, background, or motives of the person making it. For example, you're wrong about climate research because you're not a real scientist. Or, we can ignore her ideas on budgeting. She once went bankrupt. Even if the criticism is accurate, it does not by itself prove that the person's current reasoning is wrong. Another frequent fallacy is the straw man. Here, someone misrepresents another person's position, often in an exaggerated or ridiculous form, so it can be easily dismissed. If you say, I think we should find ways to use energy more efficiently, and someone replies, "So you want to shut down all industry and make everyone live in the dark?" They are not responding to your real position. They have built a straw version of your argument and knocked that down instead. The false dilemma, or false dichotomy, presents a situation as if there are only two possible options when, in reality, more choices exist. Phrases like, "You're either with us or against us," or "Either we do this drastic thing or we do nothing," try to force a complex issue into a simple either-or frame. Critical thinkers look for additional possibilities and resist being pushed into unnecessarily narrow choices. The slippery slope fallacy claims that a small step will inevitably lead to an extreme and usually negative chain of events, without offering solid evidence for that progression. For instance, if we allow flexible working hours, soon nobody will show up on time, productivity will collapse, and the company will go bankrupt. It may be wise to consider possible consequences, but a slippery slope argument must be supported by more than fearful speculation. Another trap is the appeal to authority. In this fallacy, a claim is treated as true simply because a person with status or fame endorses it, even if that person has no relevant expertise. Experts can indeed be reliable sources when they speak within their field, but critical thinkers always ask, is this authority qualified to speak on this subject? Are other experts in the field in broad agreement, or is this an isolated view? There is also the appeal to emotion, where an argument relies mainly on feelings, fear, pity, pride, or anger, rather than on facts and reasoning. For example, "You should support this policy, because if you don't, you must not care about children." Such a statement pressures you emotionally instead of offering real evidence. Emotions matter, but they should accompany, not replace. Good reasoning. Learning to spot these patterns does not mean you become harsh or overly critical in conversation. Instead, you become more careful and fair. You can say to yourself, "Hold on, this argument seems to be attacking the person rather than the point," or "This feels like a false choice. Maybe there's a third option." In doing so, you protect yourself from being misled and contribute to more honest, thoughtful discussions. Logical fallacies exist not only in other people's arguments, but also in your own. You might catch yourself exaggerating someone else's position to make your own look better, or assuming that an expert is always right because you admire them. Instead of feeling ashamed when you notice these tendencies, see them as opportunities to improve. Correcting your own reasoning is one of the most powerful forms of intellectual growth. Alongside logical fallacies, another obstacle to clear thinking is unexamined assumptions. Assumptions are the quiet background beliefs that shape how you interpret events, often without your conscious awareness. They are like tinted lenses through which you view the world. Some assumptions are practical and accurate. Others are outdated, overly rigid, or simply false. You may hold assumptions about yourself. For instance, "I'm not a creative person. I always mess things up," or "I'm just not capable of learning new skills after a certain age." If these assumptions remain unquestioned, they can act as invisible walls, cutting off paths you might otherwise explore. There are also assumptions about other people. "She didn't answer my message, so she must be angry with me," or "People from that group are always selfish," or "My colleagues don't care about quality. They just want to get things done quickly." Without realizing it, you may treat these assumptions as facts, shaping how you speak and act. On a larger scale, you may carry assumptions about how the world works. Success has to look a certain way. If I fail once, it means I'm a failure. Or life is a competition where you either win or lose. Such beliefs can limit your sense of possibility and make it harder to respond flexibly to change. Critical thinking invites you to bring these hidden premises into the light. You can ask, "What am I taking for granted in this situation?" Or, "What belief am I treating as obviously true, even though I haven't really examined it?" Writing your assumptions down can be revealing. Once they are visible on the page, you can evaluate them more objectively. Is this assumption always true? Sometimes true. Where did it come from? Does it still serve me? Challenging assumptions does not mean rejecting everything you have ever believed. Instead, it means testing your beliefs against experience and evidence. You might discover that some assumptions are reasonably accurate and helpful. Others may need to be refined, broadened, or replaced entirely. For example, "I'm not good at public speaking" might evolve into "Public speaking feels uncomfortable for me now, but I can improve if I practice and learn some techniques." As you develop the habit of questioning assumptions, you become more open to alternative interpretations. When someone behaves in a way you dislike, you might pause before deciding they are selfish or hostile. You consider other possibilities. Maybe they are stressed, distracted, or dealing with challenges you cannot see. This shift in perspective does not excuse harmful behavior, but encourages empathy and reduces unnecessary conflict. This practice of examining your assumptions connects closely to another key element of critical thinking: intellectual honesty. Intellectual honesty means being truthful with yourself about what you know, what you don't know, and where your beliefs come from. It requires you to resist the temptation to twist facts to fit your preferences or to ignore evidence that challenges your favorite ideas. Instead, you strive to let the best available information shape your views, even when doing so is uncomfortable. One way to nurture intellectual honesty is to regularly ask yourself, "What evidence would change my mind about this?" If your answer is nothing, then you are no longer reasoning. You are simply protecting a belief because it feels safe. Critical thinking calls you back to a different standard, holding your beliefs with conviction, but also with enough openness that they can evolve as you learn. Practical exercises can help you strengthen these skills. You might take a short article or opinion piece and identify the main claim in 1 or 2 sentences. Underline or list the reasons given in support of that claim. Note any evidence used, statistics, studies, examples, expert quotes, and consider how strong it is. Look for possible logical fallacies or unspoken assumptions. Ask yourself what additional information you would want. Before fully accepting or rejecting the argument, you can also practice by examining your own beliefs in a similar way. Choose a topic you care about: work, relationships, health, personal goals, and write down your main belief about it. Then list the reasons and evidence you usually give yourself. Ask, are these reasons solid? Am I ignoring counterexamples? What assumptions underlie my conclusions? This exercise can feel challenging, but it often leads to valuable insights and healthier, more realistic perspectives. As you continue to analyze information and arguments in this way, the world may start to look different. You might notice that some messages which once felt persuasive now seem shallow or manipulative. You may become less impressed by loud opinions and more interested in quiet, well-reasoned perspectives. Importantly, this shift does not mean you become distant or cold. On the contrary, as your thinking grows clearer, you are better able to act with integrity and compassion. You can commit to ideas that are truly worthy of your support, rather than being swept along by whatever happens to be the loudest or most dramatic voice in the room. In the next part, we will explore how critical thinking works, hand in hand with your emotional life, how feelings can cloud your judgment when left unchecked, but can also deeply enrich your reasoning when you learn to listen to them wisely and integrate them with clear thought. While it's important to respect facts, data, and logical analysis, this doesn't mean you should ignore your inner sense of things. Your intuitive reactions often arise from subtle pattern recognition built up through years of experience. Without you consciously noticing, your mind has stored countless examples of situations, outcomes, and warning signs. When something feels off or right, that feeling may be your brain comparing the present moment to those stored patterns at high speed. The goal is not to choose between logic and intuition. Buddho allow them to work together. Logic helps you check whether your initial sense is supported by evidence. Intuition helps you notice early signals that pure data analysis might miss. When you rely only on one and neglect the other, your decisions are more likely to be distorted, lensed. Decision-making is about creating a dialogue between the rational and the intuitive, parts of your mind. Another central theme in decision-making is how you handle uncertainty. In many real-life situations, you simply don't have all the information you want. Markets change, people change, circumstances shift unexpectedly. If you wait for perfect certainty before making a choice, you may end up doing nothing at all. One method for dealing with uncertainty is scenario thinking. Instead of trying to predict one exact future, you imagine several plausible possibilities. You might ask, what if things go better than expected? What if things go worse? What if there is a mixed outcome? For each scenario, you consider how your decision would play out and what you might need to prepare. This approach helps you design decisions that are robust across a range of futures, rather than fragile plans that work only if everything goes according to your favorite prediction. Related to this is the habit of looking at best case, worst case, and most likely outcomes. When you think about a choice, you can ask, what is the most optimistic, realistic result? What is the most serious downside I need to be aware of? What do I honestly think is most probable? By comparing these three perspectives, you get a more balanced view of risk and opportunity. You might realize that the worst-case outcome is unpleasant but manageable, or that the potential upside justifies a calculated risk. Uncertainty can also trigger fear and cause you to delay important decisions. You may keep gathering information, researching and talking to people without ever moving forward. This analysis paralysis feels like work, but in reality, it can become a way to avoid commitment. Critical thinking helps you recognize when additional information will meaningfully improve your decision, and when you have reached the point of diminishing returns. At some point, you need to say, I know enough to choose, and accept that some uncertainty will always remain. A helpful guiding idea is to aim for good enough rather than perfect. This does not mean being careless or sloppy. It means recognizing that, beyond a certain point, chasing perfection costs more time and energy than it is worth. A good decision made in time is often more valuable than a perfect decision made too late. Critical thinking helps you judge where that balance lies for each situation. Many decision-making errors come from predictable mental traps. One of the most famous is the sunk cost trap. This occurs when you continue investing time, money, or effort into something just because you have already invested a lot, even though it no longer makes sense. For example, you might stay in a job that makes you deeply unhappy because you have spent many years there, or keep fixating on a project that clearly isn't working because you've already devoted so many resources to it. Critical thinking invites you to separate past costs from future possibilities. Sunk costs cannot be recovered. They're gone whether you continue or stop. The only rational question is, from this point forward, what choice will create the best outcomes? When you focus on future benefits instead of past losses, you free yourself to make healthier decisions, even if that means letting go of something you once hoped would succeed. Another frequent trap is overconfidence. It is easy to overestimate how well you understand a situation, how accurate your predictions are, or how much control you have over events. You might assume a project will take far less time than it actually requires, or believe that nothing major can go wrong because you feel prepared. To counter overconfidence, you can deliberately look for weaknesses in your own plan. Ask yourself, what could go wrong that I haven't considered? What assumptions am I making? If I am wrong, how wrong could I be? Some people use a technique called a pre-mortem. Instead of waiting for a project to fail and then asking what went wrong, they imagine in advance that it has already failed and list their reasons why. This imaginary failure helps you spot risks and vulnerabilities early, when you can still address them. Decision-making becomes even more complex when groups are involved. Teams, families, and organizations must often make choices together, and group dynamics can either improve or damage the quality of those decisions. One well-known danger is groupthink, a pattern in which the desire for harmony and agreement within the group leads people to suppress doubts, ignore warning signs, and go along with plans they privately believe are flawed. In groupthink, individuals may stay silent because they don't want to be seen as difficult, negative, or disloyal. Leaders may unintentionally discourage honest feedback by reacting defensively to criticism. Over time, the group becomes more and more insulated from alternative views, and its choices become riskier and less grounded in reality. To avoid this, it is vital to create a culture where questioning is welcomed and dissent is respected. One practical strategy is to assign someone the role of devil's advocate, a person whose job is to challenge the prevailing plan and look for weaknesses. Another is to invite contributions from quieter members early in the discussion before strong voices set the tone. Critical thinking in groups means valuing the quality of ideas more than the status of the person who offers them. Even when you are thinking clearly, you will sometimes find yourself stuck, unable to decide, or unsure how to move forward. In such moments, structured tools can help. One useful technique is the 5 whys. You start with a problem and ask, "Why is this happening?" You answer as best you can, then ask, "Why?" Again about that answer, and soon, repeating the question until you have asked it around 5 times. This simple process often takes you from surface symptoms down to deeper causes. Addressing those root causes leads to more effective solutions than merely treating what is visible on the surface. Another helpful framework is the priority matrix that distinguishes between what is urgent and what is important. Many people spend a large portion of their time reacting to urgent tasks, emails, messages, minor crises, while neglecting important work that has long-term impact but no immediate deadline. By categorizing your tasks into 4 groups, urgent and important, urgent but less important, important but not urgent, neither important nor urgent, you can make more deliberate choices about where to focus your energy. Critical thinking helps you resist the constant pull of urgency and devote more attention to activities that truly matter. Over time, you can also build a collection of mental models, simple frameworks that help you understand and approach different kinds of problems. These might include cost-benefit analysis, systems thinking, feedback loops, opportunity cost, and many others. Each model offers a different lens through which to view a situation. By looking at a problem through several lenses rather than only one, you increase your chances of seeing key relationships and consequences. It is also important to recognize that not all situations are alike. Some problems are relatively stable and predictable, where careful planning works well. Others are complex and fast-changing, where you must act, learn from the results, and adjust as you go. Critical thinking includes the ability to tell which kind of situation you are in and to adapt your strategy accordingly. Whatever tools and models you use, reflection is a crucial part of the decision-making cycle. After you make a choice and see the results, take time to review. What worked as I expected? What surprised me? Did I overlook important information? How did my emotions influence my judgment? What would I do differently next time? These questions turn every decision, whether successful or disappointing, into an opportunity for learning. This reflective habit gradually builds resilience. When you see mistakes and setbacks as chances to improve rather than as proof of personal failure, you become less fragile and more adaptable. Resilient thinkers understand that noon makes perfect decisions all the time. Instead, they aim to make the best decision they can with the knowledge available, then stay flexible and willing to adjust when new information appears. Resilience also includes how you respond emotionally to difficulty. When a project collapses, a relationship ends, or a plan fails, it is natural to feel frustration, sadness, or discouragement. Critical thinking does not erase these feelings, but it helps you avoid being ruled by them. You can acknowledge your emotional response while also asking, "What can I learn from this? What strengths did I show even in this hard moment? What small step can I take now to move forward?" Over time, this way of thinking strengthens your sense of agency. You stop seeing yourself purely as a victim of circumstances and recognize the choices you still have, even when conditions are difficult. You become better, redirecting your energy from blame and regret toward constructive action. Resilience is not just an individual skill. It affects how you relate to others. When you are more at peace with your own imperfections and limitations, you are usually more patient with the imperfections of those around you. You can support others through their mistakes, offer honest feedback without harshness, and receive feedback without collapsing into shame or defensiveness. This naturally leads to another major area where critical thinking plays a vital role: communication. Much of your daily life, at work, at home, in your community, is shaped by conversations. The quality of your thinking deeply influences the quality of those conversations, and the quality of those conversations, in turn, shapes your relationships and opportunities. Clear, thoughtful communication begins with listening. Instead of preparing your response while the other person is talking, you try to truly understand what they are saying. You can paraphrase their main points and ask, "Do I have that right?" Or, "Is this what you mean?" This not only helps you understand them more accurately, but also signals respect and openness when conflicts arise. Critical thinking helps you avoid falling into automatic patterns such as blame, sarcasm, or defensive withdrawal. Instead, you can pause and examine the situation. What exactly is the disagreement about? What needs or values are at stake, for me and for them? Am I reacting to what was actually said, or to a story I am telling myself about their intentions? By stepping back in this way, you create space for calmer, more constructive dialogue. It is often useful to focus on interests rather than rigid positions. A position is a fixed demand. We must do it my way. An interest is the underlying need or concern. I need to feel respected, or I am worried about the deadline, or I want us to stay within budget. When you discuss interests, it becomes easier to find solutions that genuinely address what matters to everyone involved. Your nonverbal signals, posture, facial expressions, gestures, tone of voice are a powerful part of your communication as well. Even when your words sound calm, your body language can reveal tension, impatience, or hostility. Using critical thinking, you can become more aware of these signals. You might notice that you cross your arms when you feel threatened, or raise your voice when you feel ignored. With awareness comes choice. You can intentionally adjust your nonverbal behavior to support the kind of interaction you want to create. By bringing critical thinking into your communication, you transform conversations from automatic, emotionally charged exchanges into opportunities for understanding, learning, and connection. You become more capable of expressing yourself clearly, listening deeply, and working through disagreements in ways that strengthen rather than damage your relationships. As you integrate these skills, wise decision-making, resilience in the face of uncertainty, and thoughtful communication, you build a toolkit for navigating the complexity of modern life. In the sections that follow, we will continue to explore how critical thinking can guide you not only in private reflection, but also in the fast-moving, information-rich environments you encounter every day. You now live in a world where information is not only abundant, but constant. News updates, notifications, videos, articles, comments, and advertisements compete for your attention at every moment of the day. A single device in your pocket can expose you to more data in an hour than previous generations might have seen, in a week, or even a lifetime. In such an environment, critical thinking is not a luxury, it is a necessity. Without a deliberate approach, it becomes easy to slip into passive consumption. You scroll, click, watch, and react, often without fully realizing how these streams of content shape your beliefs, your mood, and even your sense of reality. Critical thinking offers tools to navigate this digital landscape with more clarity and intention. One of the first skills you need online is the ability to assess sources. When you encounter a claim, whether it's about health, politics, money, relationships, or anything else, ask, who is saying this? And why might they be saying it? A trustworthy source, usually, clearly identifies who is behind the information, provides evidence, references, or links you can check, distinguishes between facts, opinions, and interpretations, shows a willingness to correct mistakes when they are found. In contrast, unreliable sources may rely on dramatic language, offer no verifiable evidence, or focus more on provoking strong emotions than on informing you. They might use sensational headlines, one-sided stories, or anonymous claims that cannot be checked. A critical thinker does not stop at one source. When an issue matters, you look for multiple independent perspectives. If an important claim appears only in a single obscure corner of the Internet, with no support from credible organizations or experts, that is a signal to proceed cautiously. If, on the other hand, you find consistent information from different reputable sources, your confidence in the claim can increase. It is also important to pay attention to how information is framed. Two articles might describe the same event but emphasize different details and use very different language. One may highlight fear and conflict. The other may stress context and solutions. Critical thinking invites you to notice these framing choices. Ask, what is being emphasized? What is being left out? What emotional reaction does this piece seem to be trying to create in me? Another challenge of the digital age is the speed of reaction. Social platforms are designed to encourage instant responses, likes, shares, comments, reposts. This design rewards quick emotion-driven behavior rather than slow, analytical thought. It can be tempting to share a shocking headline or a dramatic story before you have fully understood it. A simple but powerful habit is to slow down before reacting. When you encounter content that triggers a strong emotion, anger, outrage, excitement, fear, pause. Take a breath. Read beyond the headline. Check the date. Sometimes old news is recirculated as if it were new. Look for the original source rather than relying on a screenshot or a quote taken out of context. Ask yourself, do I really understand what this is about? Have I checked at least one or two other sources? By creating this pause, you reduce the risk of spreading misinformation and allow your more reflective mind to engage. You move from being a passive amplifier of noise to becoming a more careful curator of what you share and endorse. Another feature of the digital world is the tendency toward the echo chambers and filter bubbles. Algorithms on many platforms are designed to show you more of what you already engage with. If you often interact with content that reflects a particular viewpoint, you will see more of that viewpoint and less of others. Over time, you may start to believe that everyone thinks as you do, or that opposing views are rare, foolish, or dangerous, simply because you seldom encounter them in your feeds. Critical thinking encourages you to step outside these bubbles. You can make a deliberate effort to follow thoughtful voices with different perspectives. You can visit a range of news sources, not just the ones you naturally prefer. You can read long-form articles and books that explore issues in depth, beyond quick posts and headlines. This does not mean you must agree with every alternative view you encounter, but it does mean you are choosing to see a broader picture of reality. A related skill is learning to recognize common forms of manipulative content. Clickbait headlines designed to attract attention, but often misrepresent the substance of the story. Deeply edited images or videos that omit crucial context, fake experts who present themselves as authorities, without real credentials or peer-reviewed work. Bots or coordinated accounts that artificially amplify certain messages to make them appear more popular than they are. By becoming aware of these patterns, You reduce the chance of being misled or emotionally manipulated. You also contribute to a healthier digital culture by refusing to reward shallow or dishonest content with your attention and engagement. At the same time, critical thinking in the digital era is not only about defense. It is also about creation. You are not just a consumer of information. You are also a potential creator. Every message you send, every comment you write, every post you share shapes the experience of others. When you apply critical thinking to what you create, you become a more responsible and constructive participant in the online world. Before posting, you might ask, is this accurate? Am I sure about the facts I'm sharing? Is this fair to the people involved? Does this add some value, clarity, insight, kindness, humor to the conversation, or am I just reacting out of anger or vanity? These questions may not stop you from sharing, but they can greatly improve the quality of what you contribute. This brings us to another crucial aspect of critical thinking that is sometimes overlooked: its relationship with creativity and open-mindedness. Some people imagine that being critical means constantly saying no, pointing out flaws, and closing down ideas. In reality, the deepest form of critical thinking is closely tied to curiosity, imagination, and innovation. Creativity thrives when you allow yourself to explore possibilities without immediately judging them. At the early stage of idea generation, you need a playful, experimental attitude. What if we tried this? Could we combine these two seemingly unrelated concepts? Is there a completely different angle we haven't considered? In this phase, criticism can be temporarily set aside so that ideas have room to appear. Once you have generated a range of possibilities, critical thinking steps in as a helpful partner. Now you evaluate your ideas more carefully. Which ones are feasible? Which align with your values and goals? Which could have unintended consequences? By alternating between imaginative expansion and thoughtful evaluation, you create a powerful cycle of innovation. This rhythm, first opening up, then narrowing down, is at the heart of many creative processes. Writers brainstorm characters and plots before refining their stories. Designers sketch many variations before choosing a final concept. Scientists imagine bold hypotheses before testing them rigorously. In each case, creativity and critical thinking are not enemies. They are complementary strengths. An open-minded thinker does not equate new with true, but is willing to entertain unfamiliar or challenging ideas long enough to evaluate them. You can say, "This view feels strange to me, but I will try to understand it before I decide." You can admit, "I have strong feelings about this topic, but I want to see what the evidence says." This openness does not mean you lack convictions. It means your convictions are informed, flexible, and capable of growth. There are many practical ways to cultivate creative critical thinking in daily life. You might take a problem you are facing and deliberately list at least 10 possible solutions, even if some seem silly. Later, use critical thinking to refine and combine the best ones. Expose yourself to fields outside your usual interests: art, music, science, philosophy, technology, and notice how ideas from one area can inspire solutions in another. Practice looking at a situation from multiple perspectives: your own, someone else's, a neutral observer's, or even a future version of yourself looking back. Ask, what if? Questions about everyday routines. What if I treat organizing my workday differently? What if we change the way this meeting is run? What if I approached this relationship with more curiosity and less assumption? As you adopt these practices, you may find that problems that once felt rigid and stuck begin to open up. Instead of seeing only one or two options, you start to notice a wider range of possibilities. This expanded sense of choice is one of the great gifts of combining critical thinking with creativity. Another important dimension of open-minded critical thinking is the capacity to hold complexity. Many issues in life are not simple. They involve conflicting values, incomplete information, and trade-offs where every option has both advantages and costs. A simplistic mindset tries to reduce such questions to slogans or quick answers. A more mature, critical mindset accepts that real understanding sometimes requires you to live with nuance and ambiguity. For example, you might recognize that a policy has both positive and negative effects, that a person you admire has both strengths and flaws, or that two seemingly opposing ideas each contain partial truth. Instead of feeling threatened by this complexity, you can see it as a more accurate picture of reality. You learn Tosk, how might both of these perspectives be valid in different ways? Or, what is the deeper question that lies beneath this conflict? This capacity to tolerate complexity is closely connected to emotional maturity. It allows you to remain engaged with difficult topics without collapsing into cynicism or blind enthusiasm. You become less tempted by extreme positions that promise simple answers to complicated problems. Instead, you are willing to take the slower path, listening, researching, reflecting, and refining your understanding over time. Such an approach can feel demanding at first. It may seem easier to adopt a ready-made opinion from a group, ideology, or authority figure and stop thinking further. But that path often leads to rigidity and conflict. By contrast, choosing to think critically and creatively, even when it's uncomfortable, leads to greater freedom, deeper insight, and more authentic engagement with the world. As your critical thinking skills develop, you may also notice a shift in your sense of identity. Instead of defining yourself purely by the beliefs you currently hold, you begin to see yourself as a learner, someone whose views can evolve as new evidence and experiences arise. This does not mean you have no firm values. It means your values are supported by ongoing inquiry and reflection, rather than by unexamined habit or fear. In practical terms, this identity as a learner shows up when you say things like, "I used to think this, but I've changed my mind," or "I don't know enough yet to have a strong opinion." These statements are not signs of weakness. They are signs of honesty and strength. They signal that you trust your ability to keep thinking, keep questioning, and keep growing. All of these elements, digital literacy, creative exploration, open-minded evaluation, and a learner's mindset, fit together as part of a larger picture, the practice of critical thinking as a lifelong journey, not a one-time skill. In the final part, we'll turn more explicitly to this idea of ongoing practice and growth, how to integrate these principles into your daily routines, so that critical thinking becomes not just something you know about, but something you live day after day. Critical thinking is often taught as a set of concepts or techniques, but its real power emerges only when it becomes part of your daily life. It is less like memorizing a formula and more like learning a skill, something you refine through repetition, reflection, and deliberate practice. Think about how physical training works. If you exercise once with great enthusiasm and then never again, you will not build much strength or endurance. But if you train consistently, even with small sessions, you gradually transform your body. In the same way, critical thinking develops when you regularly engage your mind in certain kinds of questions, habits, and reflections. One of the simplest daily practices is to review a decision you made. It does not have to be dramatic. It might be something as ordinary as how you responded to an email, handled a minor disagreement, planned your schedule, or chose what to buy. At the end of the day, pick one decision and ask yourself, what information did I use? What assumptions did I make? Was I influenced by strong emotions, habits, or social pressure? Knowing what I know now, would I make the same choice? This brief review trains you to see patterns in your thinking. You may notice, for example, that you often decide quickly when you feel rushed or anxious, or that you tend to avoid options that require short-term discomfort, even when they promise long-term benefits. Recognizing these patterns is the first step toward changing them. Another powerful habit is to pause when emotions run high. The pause does not have to be long. Even a few seconds can make a difference. When you feel anger, fear, excitement, or shame, your mind is more likely to jump to conclusions. In that moment, you can quietly name what you feel. I am angry. I feel anxious. I'm really excited. I feel hurt. Naming the emotion signals to your brain that you are aware of it and creates just enough space to choose your next action. After naming the feeling, you can ask, what would a wise response look like here? What choice will I be glad I made when I look back tomorrow or a year from now? This simple question helps you step out of the grip of the moment and reconnect with your deeper values and goals. You can also build your critical thinking muscles by regularly engaging with high-quality material. Instead of relying only on short posts and headlines, you can read books, long-form articles, or thoughtful essays that explore topics in depth. You might listen to podcasts or lectures where experts explain how they approach complex problems. When you encounter such material, do more than simply agree or disagree. Ask yourself, what is the main claim here? What reasons and evidence are offered? Which assumptions are visible and which might be hidden? How does this compare to what I already know or believe? What questions does this raise for me? Taking notes, either on paper or digitally, can deepen this process. You might write a short summary of what you read, then list your own reflections and questions. Over time, you will create a personal archive of insights, doubts, and evolving opinions. This record becomes a mirror of your intellectual growth. Another useful practice is to regularly seek out perspectives that differ from your own. This does not mean exposing yourself to careless or hostile voices. It means deliberately engaging with thoughtful people and sources who see the world differently. You might read authors from different cultural, political, or philosophical backgrounds. Have calm, respectful conversations with people who disagree with you on important issues. Attend talks, debates, or discussions where multiple sides of a question are represented. As you listen, try to understand not only what others believe, but why they believe it, what experiences, values, and evidence shape their views. You may still disagree in the end, but you will do so with greater fairness and depth. To support all these practices, it helps to cultivate self-awareness. Critical thinking is not only about evaluating external information, it is also about understanding how your own mind works. Journaling is one simple tool for this. You can set aside a few minutes each day or week to write about questions such as, what situations tend to trigger strong reactions in me? When was the last time I changed my mind about something important? What led to that change? What personal values do I want my decisions to express? Which biases do I see most often in myself? Confirmation bias, overconfidence, fear of conflict, need for approval. Writing honestly, without judging yourself, allows you to see your mental habits more clearly. With that clarity comes choice. You can intentionally strengthen helpful patterns and gradually let go of harmful ones. Of course, the path is not always smooth. As you deepen your critical thinking, you may notice discomfort in areas you once took for granted. You might realize that certain beliefs you grew up with are incomplete, that some of your past decisions were shaped by fear or convenience, or that relationships and environments you thought were normal are actually unhealthy. These realizations can be unsettling. It is tempting at such times to turn away, distract yourself, or retreat into old habits. But these moments of tension often mark the threshold of real change. When you confront them with honesty and compassion for yourself and others, you open the door to more authentic choices. To navigate this discomfort, it is helpful to remember that critical thinking is not about blaming your past self. You made your previous decisions with the information, skills, and resources you had at the time. Now you have more. The goal is not to judge who you were, but to support who you are becoming. Another common challenge is fatigue. Thinking carefully takes effort. You cannot analyze everything with maximum depth all the time. Part of wisdom is knowing when to invest full mental energy and when to rely on simple rules or trusted routines. You might decide, for example, that for everyday purchases or routine tasks, you will use straightforward habits so you can reserve your critical thinking energy for decisions that matter, choices about health, relationships, work, ethics, or long-term goals. This selective attention ensures that your mental effort is used where it can have the greatest impact. It is also important to build supportive environments for your thinking. The people around you, the media you consume, and the spaces you inhabit all influence your ability to think clearly. Consider, do you have at least a few relationships where honest questioning is welcomed rather than punished? Are there people in your life who are willing to challenge you respectfully and share their own reasoning? Does your physical or digital workspace encourage focus, or is it full of distractions that constantly pull your attention away? Where possible, seek out communities, online or offline, where curiosity, evidence, and thoughtful discussion are valued. Participating in such communities can strengthen your own commitment to critical thinking and show you models of how others practice it. As your skills and habits grow, you may find that critical thinking affects not only your decisions, but also your sense of meaning. When you examine your beliefs, values, and goals with care, you are better able to choose a direction in life that feels authentic to you. You might ask yourself, what kind of person do I want to be in 5 or 10 years? What do I want to contribute to the people around me and to the wider world? Which values, such as honesty, compassion, justice, creativity, curiosity, do I want at the center of my choices? Critical thinking does not tell you which values to choose, but it helps you clarify and live by the ones you consciously select. It encourages you to align your actions with your principles, rather than drifting according to habit, fear, or external pressure. Over time, you may also come to see that critical thinking and compassion are not opposing forces. The clearer you see reality, the more you notice the complexity of people's lives, their struggles, limitations, and hopes. You understand that everyone, including you, is influenced by biases, fears, and incomplete information. This awareness can soften harsh judgment and foster a more patient, empathetic stance, even when you firmly disagree with someone's ideas or actions. In this sense, critical thinking is not just an intellectual skill. It is a way of relating to yourself and others. It invites you to be honest, curious, and courageous, to face difficult truths without losing kindness. As you reflect on all the dimensions of critical thinking you've explored, awareness of biases, examination of assumptions, logical reasoning, emotional integration, decision-making under uncertainty, digital literacy, creativity, communication, and lifelong practice, you might feel both inspired and a little overwhelmed. There is a lot to consider. Remember that you do not need to master everything at once. Choose a few practices that resonate with you and begin there. For example, you might commit to reviewing one decision each evening, pausing and naming your emotions in difficult moments. Fact-checking, at least one surprising claim before sharing. Reading one thoughtful book or article each month and taking notes on its arguments, asking yourself once a week, what have I changed my mind about recently and why? Over time, small, consistent actions add up. Your thinking becomes clearer, your choices more intentional, your relationships more honest, and your sense of direction stronger. You may still make mistakes, be surprised by events, or face moments of doubt, but you'll have a reliable set of tools for navigating those moments. In the end, critical thinking is a way of honoring your own mind. It is a way of saying, my choices matter. My attention matters. The way I understand the world matters. By practicing this discipline, you respect your capacity to learn, to grow, and to make a meaningful difference in your own life and in the lives of others. You may not be able to control every external circumstance, but you can choose how you respond, how you inquire, and how you decide. That choice, the choice to think clearly, question thoughtfully, and act with integrity, is one of the most powerful freedoms you possess. As you move forward, keep this freedom close. Use it often. Let it shape the way you read, speak, listen, work, love, and dream. Critical thinking will not remove all uncertainty or pain from life, but it will give you a steady light with which to walk through them. A light made of clarity, curiosity, courage, and care, and that, ultimately, is what this journey is about. Not becoming perfect, but becoming more fully awake to yourself, to others, and to the world you share.